lesson is 2.1, solving one-step equations. Our goal for today is to solve a one-step equation in one variable. Before we actually go to examples, there's some vocabulary that we need to know. So first, equivalent equations. Equivalent equations are equations that have the same solution. Inverse operations undoes another operation. So if you look below, inverses of each other, for example, are addition and subtraction. Multiplication and division are also inverse operations. So let's try some examples. Our first example, we have x plus 4 equals 9. I'm going to go ahead and use inverse operations to get the x alone. Since it is x plus 4, I'm going to do the inverse of that, which is minus 4. When you solve an equation, you have to do operations to both sides. You have to keep the equation balanced. So over here, on this side, 4 minus 4 is 0. So those operations cancel each other out. 9 minus 4 is 5. So my solution is x equals 5. For b, my operation is subtraction. The opposite of subtraction is addition. So I am adding 9 to both sides to get my p alone. Well, negative 9 plus 9 cancels to 0. So I have p equals 8 plus 9 is 17. For c, I have negative 2 plus w equals negative 7. Even though we see a plus sign, we're trying to get rid of the negative 2. Well, the opposite of a negative is a positive. So I'm actually adding 2 to both sides. Well, negative 2 plus 2 cancels to 0. I have w equals negative 7 plus 2 is negative 5. For b, I have x minus negative 12. Before we worry about inverse operations, when I see minus and negative, I'm going to change this to plus or positive. So what I really have is x plus 12 equals 20. So what I want to do is I want to subtract 12 from both sides, and I get x equals 8. So that's how you would do one-step equations with addition and subtraction. With multiplication and division, it's the same idea. For our first one, we have 3 times x equals 18. Well, the inverse of multiplication is division. So to get rid of the 3, I'm going to divide. 3 divided by 3 on this side cancels to 1, so I'm left with 1x. 18 divided by 3 is 6, so I have x equals 6. For b, this is x over 3. This over, this line right here, means divide. So the opposite, or the inverse of x divided by 3, would be to multiply by 3. These 3 cancel to 1, so I'm left with x, and negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. Now c, I have negative x. When you don't see a number in front of your variable, remember that's a 1. What this says is negative 1 times x. Sometimes we get confused and we think we should be adding 1 to both sides because we see the negative in front. But the operation between our number and our variable is multiplication. So I'm going to go ahead and to get rid of the negative 1, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 cancels to 1. 27 divided by negative 1 is negative 27. Now for d, I have negative y over 4 equals 2. I want to go ahead and get rid of the negative and the 4. Okay? Since this is divide, I would do the opposite and I would multiply. But since there's a negative there, I'm going to multiply by negative 4, not positive 4. So negative 4 divided by negative 4 cancels to just 1, so I have 1y. 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. Our last example deals with fractions. If you ever have a fraction that you need to solve an equation, instead of dividing the fraction, which is hard to do without a calculator, we multiply by the reciprocal. Remember, the reciprocal means to flip your fraction around. So for the first example, Okay, the reciprocal of 5 halves would be 2 over 5. So to solve this, I'm going to multiply both sides by 2 over 5. 2/5 times 5 halves is 1. So I'm left with 1x. 15 times 2/5, if I have trouble multiplying fractions, I can make the 15 into a fraction, and then I multiply across. 15 times 2 is 30. 1 times 5 is 5. 30 divided by 5 is 6. So if I look at B, the reciprocal of negative 2 over 3 would be negative 3 over 2. So I'm multiplying both sides by negative 3 over 2. The negative 2/3 and the negative 3 halves, when you multiply those together, you get 1, so it's 1x. Over on this side, 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. 1 times 2 is 2. Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. For C, I have 4/3, so I'm going to multiply both sides by 3/4. I'm multiplying by the reciprocal. 4/3 times 3/4 cancels to 1, so I'm left with 1x. Over here, I'm going to make the negative 8 into a fraction, and I'm going to multiply across. Negative 8 times 3 is negative 24. 1 times 4 is 4. Negative 24 divided by 4 is negative 6. And then the last example, I have negative 1/3. So I'm going to multiply by negative 3 over 1. So again, the negative 1/3 and the negative 3 over 1, when you multiply them, they multiply to 1. Over on this side, 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. 1 times 1 is 1. Negative 6 divided by 1 is negative 6. So this is how you solve one-step equations.